The room was dimly lit, the faint glow from a single desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Julia sat at her desk, her fingers nervously tapping the surface of her old laptop. She had been researching the 6888, the all-black women's battalion that served during World War II, a story that had been largely forgotten for decades. Most people had never heard of them, but Julia had found herself obsessively drawn to their tale. She had spent countless hours in the library, combing through dusty books and digital archives. But the deeper she dug, the stranger things began to feel. The sounds of the outside world had faded as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving her alone with the whispers of history. The house around her creaked as if it were alive, settling into the stillness of the night. She paused, looking up from her screen. For a moment, she thought she had heard something, a faint shuffle, as if someone had moved in the hallway. She brushed it off, attributing it to the house's age and the wind rattling the old windows. But as the night grew colder, the sounds began to grow more distinct, more deliberate. Julia had first heard of the 6888 from a local history project. She hadn't expected to get so engrossed. The women who had served in the U.S. Army Postal Service during the war had been tasked with sorting through millions of pieces of mail meant for soldiers. Their work was dangerous, grueling, and sometimes the workstations were located in places far from the front lines, where strange things were rumored to happen. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. There was something unsettling about the way the women were treated, something about the way their contributions had been hidden for so long. Julia couldn't shake the feeling that their story held secrets, dark ones. It was like a shadow hung over them, a presence that lingered even in the light of day. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, breaking her from her thoughts. She glanced toward the hallway. The sound of footsteps was unmistakable this time, though she was the only one in the house. Her heart began to race, and she felt an unfamiliar chill creep up her spine. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the feeling, the strange sense of being watched, wouldn't let go. Her laptop screen flickered, drawing her attention back to the open page. The image that appeared made her stomach turn. It was an old photograph. Women in uniform, their faces stern and unreadable, standing in front of a building. But something about the image was wrong. One of the women, a tall figure at the back of the group, appeared blurry. It was as if the camera couldn't quite capture her, or perhaps, as Julia thought, she was out of place in the photograph entirely. Julia squinted at the image, but as she did, the shadows in her peripheral vision seemed to stretch and shift. She blinked, and suddenly, the photo was gone. The web page had reloaded, replaced with a list of irrelevant links. Her heart skipped a beat. Her hand shook as she clicked back to the previous page, but it was too late. The photo was nowhere to be found. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thicker. Julia's breath came in shallow bursts as she tried to focus on the screen. The footsteps outside her room had stopped. There was only silence, but it felt heavy, like something was waiting. She closed her laptop, suddenly feeling claustrophobic. The old house, with its peeling wallpaper and creaking floors, felt more like a tomb now than a home. Julia got up, pacing the room. The shadows in the corners seemed to be moving, writhing almost. She reached the door and paused, her hand on the knob. That's when she heard it. A whisper, soft at first, as though carried on the wind. It was coming from the hallway. "Help us." Julia's heart stopped. She turned, looking down the hallway, but there was nothing there. Only darkness, stretching endlessly toward the other end of the house. She swallowed hard, her pulse hammering in her chest. She had to leave. Whatever it was, whatever was here, it wasn't just her mind playing tricks. With a deep breath, she forced herself to move toward the door. As she stepped into the hallway, the whispers grew louder, clearer. "We were forgotten. We are still here." She froze. The voice wasn't just one person, it was many, overlapping, desperate. It echoed in her ears, reverberating down the hallway. She stumbled back, feeling an overwhelming urge to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Her body felt frozen, paralyzed by a force she couldn't explain. Suddenly, the air around her grew thick. The temperature dropped, and she saw her breath fogging in front of her face. The footsteps started again, this time in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though something was moving toward her.